Hi, welcome to the Prado Museum. We're here for our weekly sessions in English. Thank you so much to the American Friends of the Prado Museum for making these sessions possible. They do lots of different programming to support the Prado Museum, including these programs, so take a minute to check us out, as well as our sister organization, Fundación Amigos del Museo del Prado. Excited to be joining you from Sala 87, the 87th room, which is recently opened. It's been closed for some time for renovation, and we get an opportunity to dive into some 18th century painting, specifically Spanish, which we have collected here in this space. So great opportunity to dive into a new space in the Prado, paintings we haven't seen in a while, and really excited to dive into this one specifically today, which is The Young Woman Asleep in a Hammock by Luis Paret y Alcázar. So this painting is tiny, as you can see, but really beautiful. And we're gonna get a chance to dive in and look at all of the little details in this painting and think a little bit about how it's situated in history and connections to different parts of the world in different time periods as well, which is really interesting. So this was painted in 1780, and let's dive in for a second and look at all of the little details that we can see inside. So right in the center of the image, we have a woman. She's reclined on a hammock, and she's recently kind of tossed herself inside. She's taken off her silk slipper, one of them, which is laying here on the tiled floor. I love the details of these tiles, right? We have shadows between, showing this sort of uneven nature, telling us a little bit about this, a rather humble interior, which is being added to these luxurious silk fabrics sort of strewn about. We see her, she's holding a handkerchief in one of her hands. With her other hand, she's reclined, sleeping, her breast exposed. And then we have a lot of other little details in her that tell us information about her surroundings. So here in the lower left-hand corner, we've got a bottle of some spirit, beautifully highlighted, really looking extremely realistic for such a small space, as well as a glass of that spirit, which is tipped over and spilling on the ground. It's strewn over a small rocking chair, which is down here in the left-hand corner, as well as up in this upper right-hand corner, we have some other still life items. So we've got a bouquet of roses, as well as a small mirror and a glass. And then this is one of my favorite details in the painting, but we have an open window and light sort of streaming in. We can imagine there's a soft summer breeze kind of rolling over her, and these tiny details in this hanging metal component that's holding up this hammock and supporting her weight. So for a small painting, a ton of beautiful detail that's beginning to tell us a story. Interesting about this painting as well is the material that it's made from. So this is oil painted on copper plate, which, as you can imagine, is a very expensive and luxurious material. And you can actually see in the edges on the sides a little bit of that copper exposed there, which gives us a sense of what that ground was actually looking like. Now, after looking at all of the details in this painting, interesting to situate it in its place and time. So Paret is painting in Spain in the late 18th century, and he's kind of well known for being a great interpreter of the Rococo style from France. So he was a court painter at the time and interested in taking all of these trends from the Rococo style, because we had these Bourbon kings here, right? So this was the kind of fashion. Over here you can see an earlier work of his, which he's really interested in capturing the moment, capturing luxury, capturing leisure, and telling the story of this specific class in time, which is very Rococo. We specifically, in this painting, also get opportunities to see some of these colors, right? We've got the light pinks and the blues. And the trend with Rococo is really about telling a story about luxury and about leisure. But an interesting question that comes up when we have this focus on leisure is who gets to have a leisurely experience and what are the conditions that make this possible? So when you take all of these beautiful things and put them in one place, what do they mean and what is the larger context there? Additionally, in a Rococo context, interested in talking about intimacy and creating opportunities for us to have intimacy. And so thinking about her breast exposed, and what is our relationship to her, being the one seeing her and why, we can begin to ask those questions. Important to know about the artist's life. So while he was a court painter, there was some controversy that took place which led him to be exiled to Puerto Rico, where he lived for 3 years. And so during that time, he was exposed obviously to a whole nother part of the world and all of the context that happened there at that time. So he was able to see colonial hierarchies, the impacts of the transatlantic slave trade, opportunities to get exposure to other cultures. And we see one tiny link here in this painting, actually not so tiny, which is the hammock, right? So the hammock is, you know, an element, a fixture in Caribbean culture, in Latin American culture. And even though he had probably a way more deep experience in the Caribbean and ability to tell us a larger story, he selects this object to put in this work to place it in that Rococo leisure context, which is really interesting. So that's the only sort of Caribbean link that we see here brought into this European context. The other link we see, which is linking us to a different kind of moment in time, is the posture of our subject, right? So we have this woman, she's reclined in this hammock, and her arm is specifically in this posture, which calls us back to the classic sculptures of the Sleeping Ariadne. If you remember, in the story of Ariadne, she falls asleep, she's in a position of vulnerability, and in that moment she is left. And so her sleep and her vulnerability is very much the subject of that moment, and we see him calling on that same posture and that same idea here. So in this little tiny painting, we have links to his experience in the Caribbean, links to this story about vulnerability within this kind of Rococo imitation context, where he's helping us to have an opportunity to have an intimate moment with all of these beautiful objects in this tiny, tiny composition. Thank you so much for joining me, looking deeper at this work. We look forward to seeing you next week for our weekly sessions in English.